What's up, guys? Andrew here, back at you with another one. And this week we're going to talk about one of my favorite underrated films. This one stars Denzel Washington. It's from 2003. It is Out of Time. So, guys, Denzel Washington is a favorite of mine. Haven't really talked about him much on this channel. Very good actor. A lot of his movies, unless you're talking like The Equalizer, aren't quite as heavy on the action side. It's more acting and a little bit of drama and thriller and suspense. This movie here today, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of a suspense thriller. There's a couple of action scenes, but other than that, this is just about building tension. So basically, Denzel Washington's character, Matthias Whitlock, he is the police chief of this small town, Banyan Key, Florida. And, nothing much happens there other than as the movie starts, he's just busted these guys coming through with drugs for $485,000, in drug money. So he's got that setting in his safe until, it can pass through all the political red tape. And of course, his life's a mess. He's getting divorced from his wife, played by Eva Mendes, who's is smoking in this movie. Eva Mendes in this movie is so distracting with some of the clothes she wears if you're a heterosexual male. I want to quote Tim Meadows in The Ladies' Man. Girl, it looks like somebody took two fine hams and stuffed them down the back of your dress. I watched that scene where she's in his office and I'm just like, goodness gracious. But they're in the middle of this messy divorce. She's actually gone on from being an officer here at Banyan Key to going on to be this federal agent. And so, yeah, they're going through this messy divorce. And in the meantime, he's got this relationship with Santa Lathan's character of Anne. And of course, she's married to this character named Chris. And he's played by Dean Cain, who you might know as Superman in the 90s. And so it's very interesting, that he's this heroic character typecast. And in this movie, he's this alcoholic abuser. And he's slapping her around. And of course, she's sleeping with Matthias. And there's this great scene in the very beginning of the movie where she calls him up and she's like, yeah, there's an intruder at my house. And she doesn't sound, too threatened. And so he shows up and he's like, what did he do to you? And she's like, it pulls him closer and she's like, he was standing this close. And, they have a love scene there. And so that's getting pretty hot and heavy. It turns out that, she's got cancer and it's terminal and she doesn't have the money to get this done. And, he's thinking of all the ways that, he can save this girl that he loves. So he ends up taking this drug money, that's just going to sit there in his office until it passes through all the red tape. And we're going to go to Switzerland and get this procedure done. And it's going to be okay. And so that night he goes to meet her and she's gone. The whole thing was a ploy. And she takes the money and runs with her husband, Chris. And Chris, of course, was an ex-football player who's fallen on hard times, can't get signed, and so he was a morgue attendant. And he takes these two dead bodies, puts them in their house, and sets the house on fire. And so now they've got a double homicide. So now his ex-wife, Alex, comes down from the FBI. So they're trying to find out what happened, and he's, of course, had an affair with hers, and he's trying not to get implicated in this thing. And at the same time, the DEA calls, and they want that drug money. And he's like, oh, no, it's got to sit here, until the proper paperwork's done. And they're like, no, we want it now. And so the whole thing just builds so much tension. You've got Eva Mendes' character coming down on him, and they're trying to figure out, who all they've called. And so you've got Denzel Washington deleting all of his phone records. And she's walking into his office, and, he gets the last one. Him and his buddy, who is the medical examiner, played by John Billingsley. And I love this character in the movie. He is a true best friend to Matthias Whitlock in this thing. They're drinking buddies. They drink down at the bar all the time. And whenever they're like, hey, we got this number. It's from somewhere here in the city. Whose is this? And he's like, oh, it's mine. And he kind of takes the fall for Denzel Washington's character. I really like him. And he's got some great lines of dialogue in this movie. Just an underrated character. But he ends up finding out that this Paul Cabot had something to do with it. And this Paul Cabot was actually the guy who posed as her doctor when he went with her to go see about her cancer treatments. And the whole thing was an act. And so he goes to this hotel room, and they have this great fight that actually goes through the window of the hotel on like the 8th floor, and they go over the balcony. and they're hanging there and they're fighting each other. And if you've seen the trailer for this movie, that's the big scene in the trailer. That's a really good fight, and that's one of the best action pieces in this movie. So Ann ends up calling him on his cell phone. And, as the feds are there and the DEA is getting there, and so he goes out to this boathouse where they used to meet, to do their stuff and meet her there. And so there's this explosive ending there, with Ann and him and Chris, Dean Kane's character. It's about this time that Eva Mendes figures out that she gets the beneficiary information, and Ann had set him up, made him the beneficiary for up to $1 million. It really implicates him. And so she goes out there because they have these tracking devices on their phones, GPS, helps him take care of these two that have him at gunpoint. Just an explosive ending to a really fun and very tense movie. So Denzel is really good in this thing, as he is just about every time out. He's so cool under pressure. There's this one scene where him and Billingsley are at this crossroads, and one goes back to Banyan Key and one goes to the airport. He's like, "Man, I got 10 grand in the bank. We can be down at Costa Rica in no time." And he's like, you don't think I'll make my way out of this, do you?" So he goes back, gets back into the middle of it. Eva Mendes, as I said, she's really good in this movie. John Billingsley is Che. I love him. There's that scene at the end where they get the money back to the DEA. They show up there at the end, wherever they're like, "All right, Whitlock, I know you've had a bad night. Where's the money?" And, he's been shot in the leg and he's been grazed in the temple, with bullets. And, of course, he doesn't have the money. He's giving it to Che, who's late. And he shows up and he's like, "You told me to give this money to the a-holes on 53rd Street." He's like, "No, I said give it to the a-holes on 63rd Street. And so they have this great exchange as they're looking on like, "What?" Dean Kane is really good in this, and Santa Lathan as the co-conspirators. There's this really good scene in this movie, one of my favorite scenes, where they're at this bar, the Scuttlebutt, where Che and Matthias always drink every night, and Dean Kane comes in and he's like, "Hey, I'll have what he's having. Give him another round." And so they have this exchange here, and he knows that Matthias is sleeping with his wife, and it's just very heated. And it ends with one of the best lines ever. Matthias looks at him and says, "Give Ann my best, if you can." And I just went, "Oh!" at the end of that scene. That was just really good dialogue. I really enjoyed the score to this movie. It was done by Graham Revell, and it's South Florida. There's a lot of congas and a lot of Caribbean style stuff going on, so it really fit the movie well. And speaking of South Florida, it's a beautiful movie to look at. I've actually been down there to like that Clearwater area where they shot some of it. I haven't been on the Miami side, but I told my wife after we watched this together, I'm like, "Yeah, we're going down there," because that scene where he's fighting Cabot and they're hanging over that balcony, there's this really tense scene going on, but just off to the side, there's this gorgeous water, and I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to go see that." And there's this other great scene where him and Alex, later that night, they're kind of reconnecting. At the end of the movie, spoiler alert, they do get back together. But there's a scene where they're driving back home, and it's the sun is setting, and it's just this gorgeous pinkish red, and that shot was really striking to me. Really appreciated it. So this movie is not looked at as one of Denzel's best movies for some reason. You've got American Gangster and you've got Training Day, which I do like quite a bit. Probably will review it at one point, but I really enjoy Out of Time. It's a fun little movie. I think it runs, just a little over an hour and 45. So uh, if you got a lazy afternoon and you want something that's got a lot of suspense and some really good characters in this, like him and Che and Alex, give Out of Time a watch. It was a movie that really went underappreciated in 2003. I think it had like a $50 million budget and it made like 55, so it's considered a flop. Overall, I'm going to give this a 7.4 out of 10. I don't think it's quite a 7.5, but like I said, I do enjoy it. It's one of those Denzels that I go back to that maybe not be his greatest, like Fallen, but I do enjoy them quite a bit. So, guys, let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see me do more Denzel Washington movies. I do really appreciate him as an actor, and I am going to do The Equalizer one of these days because it's just so action-packed. But, yeah, leave that down in the comments. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I've been Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.